The Utah Jazz beat the Denver Nuggets 124-105 in an easy win to tie the series at 1-1. The Utah Jazz ran a really effective set that is not new but was difficult for the Denver Nuggets to handle and guard. Behind Donovan Mitchell and a great shooting night, the Jazz were able to come away with the easy win. In this breakdown, we're going to look at that play in particular we're going to call Horn's Twist, as well as the Nuggets ball screen defense and why they struggle to guard not only this play, but the Jazz in general. I charted out all 131 ball screen possessions from both games, and we're going to look at what type of defense was most effective and least effective for the Nuggets. My name is Coach Gibson Pyper. You can follow me on Twitter at HalfCourtHoops. If you enjoy this breakdown, please feel free to like and subscribe. The Horn's Twist set is not a new set like I mentioned, but it's an extremely effective set. It's essentially a ball screen on one side, followed by a ball screen on another, and then it goes into single tag action, which we'll cover in a bit. The first time I saw this was from the Clippers with Chris Paul, at least back to 2013-14. I've seen it previously, but it was most prevalent to me in the 2013-14 to 15-16 season with the Clippers, and the Warriors with Steph Curry ran this play as well, extremely effectively. Most teams run it today. We're going to look at how the Jazz set this play up with the first ball screen here. In this scenario, it is O'Neal setting this first ball screen, and it's going to be followed by an option for a flare screen or chase into a ball screen like Rudy Gobert sets here for Donovan Mitchell. Now, when he rolls on this ball screen, this creates shake or single tag action, which means this player here, in this case Morris, has to either tag the roll man or lift on the shake man. The play is effective because not only does it put the first ball screener in a position if he's going to switch too low to get caught on the flare screen, but no matter how the Nuggets guarded it, it just didn't matter. We can see in the first game this action working again as we get 2 on the ball with Donovan Mitchell. O'Neal's open on the flare. The reason Ingles was open on the flare in the second half was because in the first half they ran this action. Jokic and MPJ both go out to Niang, and that leaves Gobert wide open on the slip in the lane. So when he slipped in the lane, the next time they ran it later in the game, Jokic sagged off in the paint, not allowing the slip, and that allowed Ingles to be wide open on the flare. Ingles sets the ball screen here. This time Craig does a good job staying attached so the flare screen option is not available. Gobert sets the ball screen. Jokic is in drop coverage. Murray goes under, so Mitchell's able to rise up and hit the uncontested 3. In the next example, we see the play run like normal, but this time Mitchell's going to reject it and hit an open 3. Watch how he sells coming off the ball screen, gets Michael Porter Jr. above the screen. Jokic is too low, so now he's open for a wide open 3 and that ice coverage that the Nuggets were trying to run. In this example, we're going to see the same thing, except he's going to fake going on the reject, get Michael Porter Jr. leaning one direction using the ball screen, and that creates that single tag action with a nice hezzy that allows him to hit Gobert on the lob roll. Now with Ingles handling the ball, we're going to see that first screen set a little bit higher. Porter Jr. is then switched onto Ingles. He gets beat on the reject and fouls Ingles. Ingles now sets the first ball screen, the second ball screen by Bradley, and now we get a switch by Plumlee onto Donovan Mitchell. Now this is not an ideal scenario for the Nuggets as Mitchell has been torching them the first 2 games. You can see him step back, draw the contact, and go to the free throw line. Watch on the replay here how he sells with his eyebrows, and shows the ball, getting Plumlee in the air and drawing the foul and going to the free throw line. The Jazz also ran this action in game 1. They went to this and had Mitchell an open 3, but really went hard with it in game 2. Now let's talk about the Denver Nuggets ball screen defense. As I said, I charted out all of the possessions involving ball screens the last 2 games. And in this scenario, this is how often these defensive types occurred. So they blew the coverage 6 times, they flat hedged 7 times, hedged 33 times, they ran ice ball screen coverage 12 times, a higher ice 7 times, stayed attached 7 times, switched 27 times, and their normal trail and drop 31 times. Here's how often they were scored in this coverage. 3 times when they blew it, 3 times with a flat hedge, 15 out of 33 when they hedged it, 9 out of 12 times when they ran their ice coverage, 3 out of 7 when they ran the ice just a little bit higher, 2 times when they stayed attached, those are mostly on like ghost screens, so that makes sense because they end up with more isolations. When they switched, they were scored on 18 times, which also makes sense because the Nuggets were being picked on, with Michael Porter Jr. being the main culprit. And they got scored on 13 times in their trail and drop coverage. Here's an example of them switching the ball screen. More often than not, the Jazz were targeting Michael Porter Jr., Monte Morris, players like that, the weaker links they perceived on the court, especially in game 1, but that carried over into game 2. As you can see, Mitchell getting the switch here, pulling it out, and then basically knocking down an open 3 against Michael Porter Jr. He's really got to improve defensively because he struggled, especially in these one-on-one scenarios. The next coverage they struggled in was ice, or the coverage where you force it to the sideline. So you can see Morris forced into the sideline, and then the big is going to be kind of dropped and zoned up. They did not do a very good job of either communicating in the ice coverage. As you can see, Porter Jr. getting beat here. It's an easy force. Joe Ingles to his left hand, he gets to his right, knocks down an easy 3-pointer. And then here, the ice is just a little bit too high for my liking, as Mitchell just attacks the gap, gets 2 on the ball. Jokic, in space, having to move, doesn't handle defensive coverage as well as other players. What I didn't like in game 2 is how they went to this flat hedge, where basically it was like almost in hedge, but just caught into kind of no man's land and flat-footed. It just isn't very good defensive coverage. I don't expect them to do that in the next game. I think they should either hedge or continue with the drop and trail coverage, because those were the 2 most effective defenses they had. But the flat hedge just leaves the roll man open way too easily. It puts the Nuggets defense in scramble mode, and that's just not their strength. The hedge was pretty effective. I mean, it wasn't the best at times, as you can see Jokic getting caught here because Murray gets caught on the screen. So hedge is basically where the big is going to kind of step out and show on the ball screen, as you can see Jokic does here. The problem in this scenario is Murray gets caught underneath on Gobert, and getting caught underneath Gobert, Jokic goes to recover, and that leaves Clarkson open in space. So the hedging wasn't too bad, but the problem arises where if the hedge gets beat ever on a reject, it's basically lights out. Donovan Mitchell just gets downhill here easily, ends up making a nice kick out pass, but once it gets rejected, that's where the problems start to arise. So the hedge, in my opinion, is not the best option. I would prefer them to continue to trail and drop, which is what we're going to look at next. The drop coverage is pretty simple, and you're probably sick of me talking about it now, but the drop coverage is basically the big drops off in the lane. I don't think Jokic should be too far back. He needs to maybe meet it at the point of attack a little bit more, like almost at the free throw line. But I would prefer them to run this coverage more often than not, especially with Jokic, just because he's not as mobile. I think he can cause a little bit of problems. If he gets his hands up in the drop coverage, it's a little bit easier. The issue they have in the drop coverage is when they do go drop, sometimes the guards go under. And when the guards go under, that really allows the Jazz players to basically rise up, especially Mitchell, to rise up with no fear or worry that they're going to get their shot contested at all. So I would prefer them to have more of a wherewithal of kind of chasing some of those players off the 3-point line instead of going under, because going under just leaves them vulnerable to too many issues. Thank you so much for watching this video breakdown. I hope I was able to teach you something and you learned something from it. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I look forward to doing more.